Okay, guys, welcome to another session. Today, we're gonna discuss very important topic, which is automation framework. Okay, we're gonna understand first the theoretical meaning of it. I'm gonna give some examples to you. I want you to think like it's a story. Okay, so that whatever I'm speaking will start making sense. What is first we'll learn what is framework. The word framework means, and then we'll try to understand how does it relate with automation, and then the entire automation framework will start making sense to you. So first of all, what is framework? In a simple language, you think I'm opening this question to you guys. I'm gonna come back on that, but just start thinking why. What is framework? Why we need it, and then how to build it in terms of automation. And then when I say building a framework, then definitely there has to be something, right? Just not writing a code. There has to be a lot of other things. Then we'll have to start identifying necessary components required for a good framework. And then of course, once we identify those components, we'll start building that incrementally and not a big bang. Okay, big bang means starting with everything at once. That's not a right approach of building a framework. See, any product matures with time. You need to understand. Similarly, any automation framework matures with time. Okay, whenever you are proposing a framework, whenever you are building a framework, or you have started working on a new framework, it's never a good idea to start a big bang. You have to first identify what is called as MVP, minimum viable product, in terms of automation also. Okay, what is needed for automation, what is the value add of that automation at this stage. And then whenever you talk to your team, whenever you talk to your managers, whenever you present automation roadmap, you have to always talk about short-term goal, long-term goal. Okay, the reason I'm sharing all this is because I do this on a day-to-day basis, and I have seen that when we speak in this way, when we present it in this way, it creates a confidence among team and create confidence among managers also. So automation framework is not one small thing which I'll say, hey, I'm started building automation framework and probably by 20 days I'll be done. No, it's not like that. Okay, it is a continuous process. And like when I say continuous process, it means that with time it will mature, with time it will change, it has to be agile. If there is a new technology coming in tomorrow, you have to start using the technology, right? There are a lot of things we have to think of. Okay, no, I'm not coffee person. I'm a tea guy. Okay, so so what is automation framework? So before that, like I said, let's try to understand what is framework. Okay, so let's discuss what is framework. So before even I start explaining it, I wanna like to hear it from you guys. Don't think about automation framework. I'm talking about what is framework. Do anyone of you have any idea what is framework? Go ahead and share it, whatever you think of. Anyone?
Yeah, even we can't do everything at the same time. We slowly do one by one. So it's organized structure.
Okay. Okay. How about you, Divya?
Like in a different type of framed structures, I mean structural format.
Okay. You guys are kind of correct in some extent, a very small way of, but let's think about a framework. I'm gonna tell you one story, and I want you guys to relate with it. Okay. So let's assume I'm holding a conference in San Francisco. I hope someday I should, but yeah. So let's assume I'm kind of announcing a testing conference in San Francisco, and I booked one hall. I'm expecting at least 500 guests. Okay, I'm expecting 500 guests to come there, and there is a there is a whole day of different topics aligned already. For one hour, some person will talk about how efficiently you can use test data. Some person will talk about how efficiently you can automate API testing. Some person will talk about the CI/CD concept. Some person will talk about DevOps, and there are a lot of topics in line for the entire day. And I have received a huge response. There are more than 500 tickets already sold. Now think of this way: I sent you an email to you guys and give you the address of the location details, saying like, hey, this is the location, and this is the date, and this is the time. Okay, please come back. Now let's assume, because it is San Francisco, I don't know whether you guys are aware, it is a complexity in terms of parking space. Okay. Now all 500 people, let's assume everyone came by car and they stopped to a location at 10 o'clock when the conference is about to start, and then they realize, hey, there is no parking for us. Where do we park? There is no way we can find a parking. They'll waste a lot of time in finding a parking space, right? Some of them will get frustrated, may leave also and ask me refund later on. And there may be a lot of chaos, you know. This is one aspect. Okay, let's assume that okay, everyone found a parking space and everyone entered the conference. Now once everyone comes inside the conference, they don't know which floor to go, or they don't know which seat to occupy, because generally in bigger conference like this there will be reserved sitting arrangement, right? Okay, so what they'll do is first come first serve basis, whoever whatever finds them, they'll start grabbing the space one by one. Okay, that is also fine, but there also a lot of chaos may happen because there are a lot of people coming. If they don't know what seat to occupy, it's kind of little bit difficult to manage 500 people at once, right? But okay, let's assume they somehow be very friendly, managed everything, and everyone sat down and the conference is about to start. Now I came on the stage and I started explaining that, hey, I have this entire day lined up, but the first topic is let's say API testing. And some people started wondering that, hey, I didn't come here to listen API testing. I want to listen database testing. Can you please have database testing first? Because I didn't give them a schedule that what session is gonna be. Okay, see, try to think loud. This will help you to understand the framework as a concept. Okay, now but there will be some disappointment, but some people will think, okay, let it be. Let's listen entire day. Doesn't matter. It's not gonna hurt me anyway, even if I listen API testing. Okay, so the API testing session started. Somehow then I'm saying that, hey, I want you guys to note down this. Please write it down on a piece of paper. And then they suddenly think, hey, you didn't ask us to bring pen and paper. Now what we should do? Again, there is a chaos. And they'll think, okay, let's try to note it down on a mobile. And then some people will have pen and paper. Some people will go outside and say, hey, can you please hold on? I'll buy something outside stationery and come back because I may need it for an entire day. I'll say, okay, fine. Then once I'm done with my first session, next session, entire day is done. And then I'm asking them to, can you please, when you walk out from the class or when you walk out from a session, there is a registration bench over there. Can you please go and register for my classes, or there is a subscription, there is a magazine or whatever. I want to sell them. Now all 500 people at once went to that stall, and again there is a chaos there. See, what I'm trying to tell you is, when you want to manage some bigger events, okay, when you want to make sure that everything whatever you are planning to do gets a fruitful result, we need to establish some process, we need to establish some discipline, we need to establish some guidelines. Do you agree that?
Yeah, of course.
And when we establish such process, when we establish such guidelines, then the chances of getting success on such bigger events is more, right? Okay, so what we would have done differently to manage this? Let's go back from the first point. When I emailed you guys with the location and time, what I would have done differently to manage the parking chaos? Can anyone tell me?
Response button, whether they are registered for ticket or not.
No, all of them are coming. All of them are coming. But what I would have done differently is, probably I would have asked them, are you interested to park? Are you coming by your own? Are you taking a public transport? Or a very simple question, let's say, do you need parking? Right? And if say yes, then I should able to guide them a proper parking spot, saying like, hey, it's better if you arrive 1 hour before, then you can park it at this. Probably I can send them a different parking maps around the location, indicating that, hey, if you don't get this parking space, then please move on to this space, please move on to this space. Do you get my point? Or I can go one more step above, saying like, hey, you guys are in part 1, you guys are in part 2, you guys are in part 3. Part 1 is expected to come between 8 to 8:30 and park in this location. this is the allotted parking for your group. Park 2 is allotted parking in this group. Part 3 allotted parking in this group, right? If I do this, there will not be any chaos and everyone knows which group they belong to and what is their parking allotment, right? Fine. So we handled that. Now, once everyone starts entering, what different I would have done is sending them the entire schedule up front that, hey, this is the time slots of each topic. You decide what topic you are interested to attend, right? So if you are interested only in database testing, 3 to 4 is the time slot for you. Rest of the time you can roam around San Francisco, go to Golden Gate or do whatever, right? So people know what to expect at what time. Also, to handle the chaos of pen and paper, I can give them upfront instruction in an email, or when they are entering a session or when they're entering the conference room, there itself I can handle a sample stationery to them, right? Saying like, hey, this is the samples folder. It may need when you are attending a session to note down some points or to write it, probably some branding items also. So that is also resolved. Now, if I also give them a seating number before even they arrive in an email saying like, hey, this is the row number 3 and seat number 82, this is your spot. There is no chaos finding a seat, right? Because their seating arrangement is also allotted. Now, once I start my session, so what I'm trying to tell you is, I think you guys understood. The idea here is whenever you are dealing with bigger audience, it doesn't matter with automation or with arranging a wedding or you are arranging an event or your own home. Okay, when you are dealing with multiple items, if you establish a process, if you establish a guideline, if you have some set of rules, then the management of that entire thing becomes fruitful, right? The chances of getting the output is good. Now let's try to understand in terms of automation. Now coming back to automation, automation is not a simple vanilla thing like writing a script, executing, that's it. It's not like that, right? We have to think about who are the target audience, who's gonna run the automation, do they know how to open an ID, right click on a code, run it? No. Then what are the ways I can provide you them to run the test, right? Where to run the test, what test data I'm expecting, how I'm gonna get that test data, how the execution report should look like, who are my target audience to look into that report, and there are so many things to think of. Okay, so when you start thinking about all these questions and when you start answering those questions one by one by different technologies or by different tools, then we say I am building an automation framework. Are you getting my point? How about you, Divya? You're with me? Okay. So now I'm going to show you guys a definition. You will understand now a little step, one step above than what it is. Automation framework is a collection of assumptions, concepts, and practices you bring in while developing an automation project, so it helps in constituting a work platform or support for automated testing. Okay, maybe a little difficult for you to digest, but you will understand this exact meaning. Another definition of automation framework: a set of guidelines, like I said, coding standards, test data handling, object repository treatment, which when followed during automation scripting produce a beneficial outcome like increase in code reusage, higher portability, reduce script maintenance cost, etc. This is just a high level example for you guys to understand what is automation framework. Are you guys able to relate now with our previous example? Automation framework is not just one thing, guys. When we ask people, hey, what is automation framework, they'll start explaining about TestNG. You need to understand, like I said, automation framework is an umbrella, a big sky under which you can have a lot of things. Now, what are those lot of things? Based on the problem in your project, how efficient you want each of these things, like how efficient code reusage you are looking into, how efficient object repository you are looking into, how efficient test data handling, reporting, portability. Portability means, when you take this automation framework from one environment to another environment, how efficiently it can run, or do it need a lot of manual configuration, manual setting up, and how efficiently you are writing the code so that it is not expecting a huge maintenance cost in the future. There are so many things to think of. I'm gonna explain you some of it. So when you start answering this, relate relate with our previous example. When I say framework,
I'll just be back in 1 minute.
framework, yeah, sure. So when I say framework, so framework is a set of guidelines, a set of process, a set of principles which we establish on our project, and we say, hey, this is how our framework is, which means you are supposed to create a method for login and then you call it to your script. You can't directly write the code inside your script for login. you know that is the standard you are explaining to newbie who is joining in your project. You're saying like, hey, this is my project, this is how our framework works, which means we have segregated the login logout methods and the scripts are calling those methods. So if you want to write any new functionality, you shouldn't be writing it in your script but create a method for it and then call that method. This is the part of framework building. Another thing, how we execute our scripts. And are we always executing right click run as Java application? Are we creating some kind of execution strategy for it? We are uploading it to some tool and then the tool is automatically running it, or we have some process in place for execution. That is a part of automation framework. How we are reporting the test results. Are we generating any HTML reports, or we are interested in using a lot of third-party tools? There are a lot of plugins nowadays which says, hey, you use this jar and will automatically create a report for you on the fly when you run your Selenium test. So when you decide to use that kind of third-party plugins or third-party jars for reporting, again, that is creating a framework, because you are setting up the standards like that, you are setting up the guidelines like that, you're setting up the rules like that, right? So whenever we say automation framework, this is what I want you guys to understand. It's not just one thing. It is a collection of practices. It's a collection of assumptions and a lot of things for a fruitful automation results. Now, when I say fruitful, it can be a lot of things like increased code reusability, higher portability, reduced script maintenance, and whatever, right? Now, the point is how we build it. Like I said, keep that thing in mind. Automation framework is never a big bang approach. It is an incremental approach, right? So you have to start thinking about an MVP for your project. Like, okay, what is needed? What is the immediate value add I'm trying to achieve from my automation? See, one thing I always see in most of the projects is people miss to identify the value add and people miss to develop that value add in automation projects. And that's why most of the automation projects who doesn't get started on the right track gets failed. You have to constantly ask this to your managers. You constantly ask this to yourself. What is the value add we are expecting from automation? Next is, are we on the track to achieve that value add, right? These two questions will give you the answer about MVP. What is the immediate MVP for your automation? Now coming back to how,
Okay, sorry to pause this one. Sir, what is an object repository?
yeah, I'll explain you that. Yeah, that's a good question. I'll explain you that. Okay, so let's assume how we build automation framework. Okay. When we'll talk about page object model, Joseph, there I'll explain it in detail, but just giving you high level understanding. Okay. So forget about these diagrams, like on my left. So when you are building an automation framework, like I said, you have to think of each and every component of our automation, how efficiently we can handle it. Let's, for example, you guys already know how to create methods, right? And the reason we create methods, the reason we use method is the granular approach of automation and reusability, right? If tomorrow some person is trying to do similar thing, rather than he writing the same code, he'll call the method, right? That is the overall intention of creating a methods. Now what we do is, when we create an automation framework, we think of, okay, how I'm gonna run my script. Is it always I'm gonna give actual code to run, the script which actually have the main code of login and then validation and then this, is everyone gonna run that particular script, or there's a good to create something called as driver script. Driver script is a blank script who only calls the actual script, so that we are not exposing the code to everyone, whoever is running our script. You're getting my point? So we create a blanket script, like a normal script, another class, and then we say, hey, if you want to run my script, you just call the driver script. Driver script will internally call whatever the reusable script or whatever, right? See, there are multiple ways to create this framework. Like I said, there are multiple ways to handle that session which we were discussing earlier, right? Similarly, there are a lot of ways. There is no one strict way that how you should be creating a framework, but our ultimate aim is how efficiently we are handling each of those processes, right? Now I'll switch back to our topic. Okay, now when we create a framework, especially in Selenium, so far we were writing the individual scripts, and in that script we are writing individual XPaths, and then we also understood how to write the property files, right? Now think of this way. If we are writing XPath for a specific button, okay, let's say I'm clicking on some button on my application and I have written an XPath for it, and I have 10 different scripts. All 10 different scripts are using the same button, which means I'll have to write the similar XPath in all 10 different scripts. Is that right? What is the one way? I'll copy paste that, because I know, hey, I have written already in that script. So let's copy paste that button code here. You're getting my point? So we'll copy paste that button XPath in all 10 different scripts. Okay, fine. But what if some other person in your team has joined? He's also trying to automate and he's also dealing with the same button. He may write again an XPath in a different way. There is a chance, right? Because XPath can be written in 100 different ways. So he'll try to write maybe using ID, you will try to write maybe using class. You never know, right? But try to understand, he is investing an effort to write XPath for a button which is already being done by someone else, which means we are not doing reusability of code, right? That is one point. Another point, tomorrow if that button XPath changes by some reason, okay, what does it mean now? You and your friend, all of you need to go and change your XPath in all those 10 scripts. You get my point? Because we have individually written those XPaths in all 10 different scripts, and now the XPath has changed. We have to go and change all of it, because otherwise all 10 scripts will start failing, right? That question comes in maintainability. Now, do you think your code is written in an optimized way so that it is less maintainable? No, right? At this stage, when we have a same XPath in 10 different scripts, it is not maintainable code, right? It needs a lot of efforts. I'm giving you 10 scripts, but believe me, in actual scenario, it will be hundreds of scripts. Okay. Now, this is a problem statement. How you'll solve this problem? Can anyone of you suggest anything? How? Just focus on this problem statement of XPath of a button.
Create a property file with some reusable for that button.
Okay.
Some script.
Mhm. Mhm.
With details of all the 10 scripts. So whenever we run that script, the activity in all the 10 scripts is part for that 10 script get updated.
That's a good point. Yep. How about you, Joseph? What do you think? What we can do?
We don't need to write that and methods to find the same one. So public is one element that we want to find that
Mhm.
if you want to make a change, you can. If you use the same method of any function, you make a change in one place, so everyone get used to it. So they don't need to change much.
Mhm.
Reusable code.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think you both started thinking about automation building now. Okay. Whatever you're thinking when you're trying to solve a specific problem, right? And that problem is right now that how efficiently I can write my code so that I avoid duplication of efforts all the time, or I can create my code more reusable. Now, let me give you a quick example. Okay, so now let's understand. I'm gonna explain you only one part of framework. Okay, one problem statement we are trying to solve here, and then you'll slowly understand the rest of the things, because there are so many things to. So let's assume I have 4 scripts. Like I said, I have 4 different scripts, and each of these script carries a button. So let me say, okay, this is a button, and there is a code of this button written in all these scripts, in this script, in this script, and in the last, like 4 scripts, just for our example. Now when the XPath changes, I'll have to change it here, 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 and here, right? Rather than that, what we are saying is, okay, Saurabh, rather than hard coding that XPath in once all the 4 different script, let's say if I create another file, okay, let's not worry if it's a Java file or it's a property file or it's a CSV file or text file or JSON or XML, whatever it is. Okay, let's assume that I'm creating something. Now, rather than writing the XPath of this button here, if I write that XPath of the button in that file, right? If I write it in that file, and then what's happening? Okay, and then rather than hard coding it, what I'll do, I'll refer this file whenever I want the button XPath, right? Here also I'll refer that file, here I'll refer that file, here I'll refer that file. Now what advantage we are achieving by doing this? Tomorrow, if the XPath of that button changes, right? Do I need to go and change in all 4 different scripts? No. We just need to change it here. Are you getting my point? Are you getting my point, guys? So if you have 100 scripts, all 100 scripts will automatically get updated the moment I update this one file, right? So what does it mean? That I solved a problem by doing some guideline, some structure, some process. So tomorrow when new person join in our project, he will not hard code his XPath in his own script. You getting my point? We will say, hey, this is not our part of our framework building. We do like we maintain our XPaths in a separate file. You need to please add your XPath there first before you add, check whether it already exists. You getting my point? And if it already exists, just consume it. If it doesn't exist, add a new, and then refer that XPath in your script. This entire process of explaining you to your friend how we are dealing with XPath is a part of automation framework building, because you are setting up the guideline, you are setting up the process, you are creating something which will help to maintain your project in a long term with a much reusable code, right? Are you guys understanding this? So this is a one aspect of framework building. And what is that aspect right now we are focusing? How efficiently we can handle our XPaths, or how efficiently I can handle our object locations. Now in another word, can I say this is my object bank? Because basically we are building the object addresses, XPaths, location details in that file, right? So this file, this is not a self-runnable file. I can't run this file on its own because it carries only it. Let's assume this is a CSV file, and each and every row carries an XPath and column carries a object name, button, field, drop down, whatever. And you read that XPath from the CSV file and put it in your script, correct? So what I'll call that CSV file is a collection of object locations, right? In a much more technical word, I can say this is my object repository. Does that sound similar to you?
Yeah.
Right? Because it is a repository of different objects. Now, to again handle it more efficiently, this file, let's assume if I start implementing this approach in my project, do you think one file will be sufficient to maintain all the objects of your automation on all your project? Oh, do you think? No, the question is, will one file be sufficient to handle all the object definitions, all the XPath, all the location detail of everything on your application? Don't you think it will grow bigger and very big?
For buttons, one file for drop downs or like
Very good. Very good. See, the idea here is if you create only one file, of course you can do it. But again, you have to think about maintainability. You have to think about cost efficiency, reusability, how easy it is to use. Tomorrow, when some person is joining in your team and he's looking for an XPath for a button, and he look into this file and there are 5,000 objects already there, he'll get confused, he'll get frustrated, right? There is a chaos. So again, you can think of again optimizing this. Probably like Divya said, let's create another file for a button, another file for text box, another file for drop down, or create a different files for different pages of your application, right? Create a different file based on different modules of your application, right? And lot of strategies you can use to actively and smartly handle your object repository, right? That is a page object model we're going to learn in some time. Very important question for interviews and very famous nowadays. Everyone uses it. Okay. How to do it, I'm going to explain it later, but I'm explaining you right now the need of it, explaining you what it is, why we need it. And if you understand this, rest of the part is just technicality, you know. But now, did you guys understood what we are trying to achieve here? Like in a very simple words, test data. If you remember, I always said thumb rule in automation, try not to hard code test data in your script, right? When I say not to hard code, because I know testing is all about testing with a different set of data. And if we hard code automation with a one set of data, then we are already keeping that script very limited. In one testing, automation is repeated, right? So it will always repeat the same test data all the time, which is called as pesticide paradox. If you guys learn in manual testing, right? A concept of testing on a same set of data again and again, which results in no bugs down the line after some year. Like plants, if you treat them with the same pesticide every year, they get resistant of it. They, you know, something like that. So test data shouldn't be hard coded. When I say avoid hard coding, you will think of, okay, if I don't hard code, then from where do I read it? Either you will create property file, you will create XML file, you will create CSV, or you may directly fetch it from database, right? That's up to you. Again, that is a part of framework building. When you think of strategy of handling a problem, that is a part of framework building, right? So there is a one point here we are handling for test data. One point we are handling for object repository. One point we are handling of how efficiently we can execute the test cases, how efficiently we can update all my test cases at once. So if I want to do some update, right? If I want to update all my 1,000 test cases at once, how do I do it? Do I open each and every test script and start identifying what I need to update and then go, let's say error message, right? If there is an error message on a page, which is recently updated, and that error message validation is in my 50 different scripts, will I go and open all 50 different scripts and update error message text? No. Of course, if I want to, I will do that. But the only people will do that is who don't have framework, who don't have a specific strategy to address such issues, right? So you have to think of that. Oh, can I have my separate file where I'll handle my error messages and I'll quickly read it from there, you know? So the more you granularize, the more you use different strategies to handle a very specific problems in automation, that is called as framework building. Okay, that is called as automation framework building. Now, when I talk about TestNG, when I talk about Maven, when I talk about page object model, when I talk about Jenkins, Log4j, extend reports, you may get scared about all this technology, but now you can understand that each of this technology is addressed, is created to solve one specific problem in the automation building, framework building, right? So when I say this object example, when we are learning about this object example, now your focus is entirely on how efficiently I can handle my objects. When I say object, is an element, HTML element, right? Driver.find element by, and we hard code that whatever the XPath is, either by ID or whatever it is. Now, with this example, you understood that it may not be a good idea to hard code my XPaths inside a script, right? So I need some strategy for it. Okay, what I can use? I can use page object model strategy, page object factory strategy. So go ahead and listen about it today after today's class, because probably by tomorrow I'm going to explain about page object model. Okay. So do some study around it. So when you think about handling your objects in an efficient way, you think about developing a page object model. You are thinking about page object factory. And that is a part of framework building. That is a part of one specific problem you are addressing in a framework, right? Now let's talk about execution. When you want to run your test cases, of course, there are multiple ways to think of, right? How I can make our test execution more efficient. I'll give you another example. I want to listen from you guys now, because if you understand this, and I can assure you guys that you will be one of the best framework builders down the line. Okay, because it's all about thought process. It's about understanding in the core. When you say automation framework building, it is not just one thing. I want you guys to think as a holistic approach about all the things. When you build a building on a plain land, right? You think about electricity, you think about plumbing, you think about the roof, you think about cementing, paint, design, tiles, lot of things, right? Why you think about all these things? Because you want end product has to be very good. Similarly, when you're building automation framework, it's just not one thing to think of. It is how efficiently I can handle my object repository, how efficiently I can create my test data reading, how efficiently I can have execution, reporting, maintenance, so many things. And I don't want to be an open-ended person thinking about everything. Going back to my first line, don't think of big bang implementation. Automation framework building is an incremental approach, right? You have to think about short-term goal, you have to think about long-term goal. If you think I don't have 1,000 scripts right now, doesn't make sense for you to start implementing a solution which is needed for 1,000 scripts. You're getting my point? So you have to think about what is the immediate need in my project, what is the MVP, minimum viable product, for my automation. So of course you want to get ready for a future, but don't just directly jump on the future because you don't even have a present of 1,000 scripts. So don't start building a framework which will address the 1,000 script modification at once, and you'll say, hey, this is the external plugin which helps us to update 1,000 script quickly, let's start using it. But dude, you don't even have 1,000 scripts at this time, right? So think what is needed. Every project has a different needs. Like I said, think of an incremental approach. Tell the short-term goal, tell the long-term goal to your managers or to yourself. Find out the MVP, start building it. It gradually matures with time. Okay, automation framework matures with time. Now I want to talk about another problem statement. I want to listen from you guys. We have Ravali with us. Hi, Ravali. Okay. Glad you joined, because today's session is very important. We are talking about automation framework building. Okay.
I could not join, but anyway, I joined it.
Yeah, I'm gonna anyway give a recording. I'm recording it for you guys.
Okay.
So now let's talk about another problem statement. Now this problem statement is related to execution. Okay. The first problem statement we try to understand about object repository, right? How efficiently we can maintain or update your object definitions. So when I say object definition, XPaths, object repository, element repository, it's one and same. Okay. I hope you guys understood it. Now, talking about execution. Now let's assume I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's assume these are 500 scripts. Okay. I can't add 500 scripts on this diagram, but let's assume that there are 500 scripts with me, and your manager asks you to run all of them every day, all 500 scripts every day. Like, say, okay, fine, I'm running them. I know I'll probably I'll run it in sequential, one after this, one after this, one after this, and then to run them, probably I'll write some kind of another script which will call them in one by one, or I'll use a tool where I can run one by one. Again, part of automation building, right? You'll think of strategy, how I can run all of those scripts one by one. Now tomorrow your manager comes and say, hey, there is a specific module, let's say health plan management. I'm just giving a vague example. He say, hey, we are seeing a lot of bugs in that area. I want you to run only that module. Can you please do it for me? Now you will come in and say, hey, you know what? I'll have to identify which script belongs to that module. and you will say, okay, let me start looking into my 500 scripts. You will see this script. Okay, this script doesn't deal with the health plan management module. This script doesn't deal with it. By just looking at the name, maybe, because you can't afford to go into the code of it, right? By looking into names or some kind of indicator will give you some list of. So you'll say, okay, this script, and this script, they all belongs to one module, which is health plan. Okay. So we'll say, okay, fine. You want me to run the scripts only for that? Let me do it. But now how you will do it? Will you go manually and select the script, select this script, select this script? Let's say you have 238 scripts. Now, the question in front of you, the problem in front of you, how do I execute the 238 unique scripts out of the 500 scripts, which is only for this module? Now you'll say, okay, I need some time. I'll have to create a driver script and another script with this many details, which calls only health plan module scripts, and I execute them. And the manager say, okay, take your time. So you will create another script. You will name that script as, health plan module scripts. And probably in that script, you will write a code to call this script, So you will write a code to call this script, and this script. You'll say, okay, I'm ready. Can I go and execute? You'll say, yeah, please. You'll execute this script, which is 238 scripts, right? Are you getting this story? Okay, so you will say, okay, I have a script which only for health plan module. So tomorrow your manager says, okay, you know what? I think the 238 is also big enough. It's taking 5 hours to execute. Can you please execute very important high priority in that? Now you'll say, oh, okay. Now what you will do? You'll say, probably I'll have to again look into all those 238 scripts to understand what is the most important, Then you will again spend some time, probably an entire day, to understand the priority one cases. And then you will say, okay, you know what? I have another subset, which is 50 scripts, which is high priority within that plan. And then now the question is, how do I execute this 50 now? There is one possible way. Here, whatever you have written, you will delete rest of it and just keep 50, right? Or you will create another script which will call only those 50. You're getting my point? Okay, this is also done. You executed that 50. Now your manager again comes and he says, hey, you know what? I want you to first run this 50, and if this passes, then run rest of it. So try to understand this story. This is a realistic one. It happens in automation. So what you are doing here is, you already have a scripts for individual area. You are creating another script for a selected script to run. You are creating another script for again some kind of sub-selected script, and so on. So the story can go in any direction. It can go in this direction. It can go in this direction, anyway, right? So the whole point is, your execution strategy is not in place. You don't know how efficiently, how quickly, how profitably I can run my scripts based on the requirement, right? Now, when you have this problem statement in your mind, you'll start thinking about, okay, is there any solution for me in the market where I can use it? That is a part of framework building, right? When I solve a problem in automation with some kind of integration as a external tool or anything, you are thinking towards automation framework building. Now, then you suddenly think about, or so you suddenly listen on some blogs or YouTube that, hey, there is something called as TestNG. There is something called as TestNG, which is testing framework, okay, which helps you to quickly select whatever tests you want to run, and you no need to duplicate your script. Now you see you're duplicating a script. You're unnecessarily writing a lot of code just for testing. You're getting my point? You are writing another script, and there may be so many things. So basically you are wasting your code writing again and again in multiple scripts just for testing need. So your strategy is, how efficiently I can test my code based on your requirement in a matter of clicks, in a matter of one file changes. So then the solution comes in the form of some external tool, which is TestNG. Now this folks says, you know what? If you developed your script by following some set of principles, by following some set of guidelines, which we ask you to do, then we can help you to execute any test in any way possible in a matter of just clicks. That is a part of framework building, because again I'll go back to a definition. What is framework building? Framework building is a set of guidelines like coding standards, test data handling, object repository treatment, or test execution, which when followed during automation scripting produce a beneficial outcome like increased code reusage, higher portability, reduced script maintenance cost, etc. This is called as automation framework. Now again, here the problem statement is execution. How we are handling the execution? By using some external tool called as TestNG. Does TestNG is helping us to develop any automation? No. I mean to say this is not like a Selenium web driver which helps us to identify or click or do something, right? This solution is for us to how efficiently I can quickly execute my scripts based on a requirement. And in order to do that, TestNG people says, hey, I have some set of guidelines for you. I have some set of rules for you. If you follow that while developing your script, I'll able to help you to execute whatever you want. And that set of guidelines, that set of principles is nothing but TestNG annotations. Okay. So when we develop a script, we make use of something called as annotations. It is very simple. Annotations are a kind of very simple thing. Let me open one of the test case. In a last session we discussed on a high level on that, but let me bring this for you guys. Okay, this is one of my TestNG test. So what I'm saying is, okay, if you develop your scripts in some following some standard which I ask you to do, when I say I, TestNG folks, so when you just write @test before you're writing any test, I'll consider that one method as one test. When you type as, let's say, before class, I'm just giving an example. Okay, there are so many things. Just say I'm just writing before class. It has to be okay. So and then you'll have to hover your mouse and import the annotation before class. So now, so there is a set of guideline. TestNG people says, okay, can you please do this? If you want something to be before class, after class, there are lot of annotations. I'm gonna give you that later on. But there is a specific strategy they suggest, so that if you follow that, you can have multiple texts in a same test. You can say, okay, before class, and then you can also say like test, okay, and then so on. You can add one annotations or multiple annotations. So when you do your script development by following some guideline, by following some principles, what happens? Tomorrow when you run into this problem, your manager says to execute one specific module or select, you no need to manually go and look into your 500 test case inventory to select what I need to execute. What you will do is, there is something called as TestNG XML. In this one XML, you will write a specific XML which will select those many test cases with a specific annotation, and it will start running for you. You're getting my point? If you have 500 scripts in, and each of those let's assume in this our example, here I'm saying module, I'm the very vague example I'm saying, but here I'm just adding a, a create annotation of a health plan module, let's say. See, I'm going to explain about annotations later on. This is a very high level right now. So I'm saying, okay, create this annotation for me. And this source folder public, okay, finish. Let's take this, come here, and it's been added. Okay, so now, so when I created an annotation for one specific module and then added, and whatever test belongs to that module, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do like this, So tomorrow, what happens when my manager asks me to run a high priority test or low priority test or this module, that module, I no need to look into my inventory of 500 test cases. I'll simply come to my TestNG XML and I'll say, hey, TestNG XML, can you please execute this module for me? Just giving a vague example. So let's assume here, instead of name equal to, I'll say, okay, can you please pick up all the tests with this module and start running for me? And he'll say, okay, why not? So you will just do a changes in your this XML and then right click this XML and then you say, okay, run as testng suite. So this XML will decide what test to select from your 500 test cases, and how he will decide based on the configuration details, based on the setting you define in this XML. So in a dynamically runtime, it will decide based on whatever you define in this XML. You no need to right click and go to each and every this test to run it. You just define what you want to run in the testng XML, and then you run that, right click on that XML, run as testng suite. When you do this, it will select the list of test cases which matches this module and start running it for you one after another.
Saurabh, I have a small question here. So
Mhm.
there are existing scripts, say like we already have like 200 minute scripts which we have developed not using the testng and all that.
Mhm.
So how can we migrate it? Like, so we have all the existing test cases, and the test cases we are going to build migrate it to testng.
Good question. Very good question. Specifically, these kind of challenges comes if you do not develop your framework by using such technologies, right? In a more technical word, rather than saying migration, we refer it to as a refactoring the test cases. Okay. So there are multiple approaches, Ravali. There are some external exporters available, which means they'll try to read your test case and give it to a testng compatible test cases. Again, this is a problem statement in front of you, and you have to look for a solution. Either the solution will be do on your own, like go into each script, and or you have to think about, is there any plugin which will help me to do it? Is there any any external tools which will help me to do it? And I'm sure there should be something which will help you to migrate, you may call, or refactor with a testng compatible test cases. Now, uh, but yeah, very, very good question. And this is how you start thinking about tomorrow, and that's what I want you guys to think of. Here, what specific problem of automation strategy we are trying to address? Only execution strategy, right? Only execution strategy. How we can execute, or in other words, how granularly I can maintain my test cases, how efficiently I can segregate my test cases with priority 1, priority 2, this module, that module, how we can create different test suites, right? In manual test case also, when you create 1,000 test cases, you create different folders, right? Module 1, module 2, this, that. Similarly, testng folks says, okay, if you follow one specific annotations, or there is a specific way, then you can club your test cases together and tell me what to execute. You can create different test suites. I'm going to come on that later on. See, testng is a very big topic, guys. I may not able to go in deep and explain you each and everything. But once you understand why the testng is needed, if you understand the problem statement we just discussed, the rest of the thing is just implementing those annotations and changing this XML. Changing an XML and running it. I'm gonna explain you in another session one more time about how efficiently you can use these annotations. Okay. Now, in testng, this I don't know if you guys observed it or not. There is no main method. Did you guys observe? When we create a testng test, we don't need a main method. Okay. You don't need a main method. Generally, so far, whenever we were writing our tests, if you remember our previous tests, we always need a main method, right? Because main method is an executable method, and that is why when we do right click run as Java application, it start running it, the main method. In a testng test, you don't need that, because the testng jars which we added and imported in our project, that jar itself in a way acts like a Java compiler. Okay. So in a simple language, I can say that testng itself internally has a main method. So you no need to worry about explicitly writing main method here. Okay. So it creates your life easy by avoiding you writing a main method. It says, okay, you don't have to worry, but I will consider every method as one test case. If you define it as a test, if you say like this, for testng, this one method is equivalent to one test. Okay. One test. You can have multiple tests in a same class file. You can have login test, you can have logout test, you can have any number, and then individually inside this you can write your own code. So for example, if you want to write driver something, I can write this entire thing in my one method here, right? And I have written one test. This is my one test now. Similarly, I can write another test. Similarly, I can write another test, and so on. And I can use more than one annotations with that test. Now, what flexibility we are getting by doing this is we are developing our test in a much more modularized way, right? We are annotating our test with a different structure, so that when we can we get a flexibility to execute them in a way we want, right? Some people may want to run some suite first and then say, okay, if this pass, then only run next. If this doesn't pass, don't run next. There are so many things. That's why that before class, after class, before method, after method, it will start making sense. When I'll explain you those annotation usages, then you will start making sense. But right now, at least I hope you guys understood the need of TestNG, right? And what it is a testing framework. Okay. It helps you to write the test cases in a proper way. It helps you to execute the test cases in a proper way. Is it a reporting framework?
No,
Is it a test data handling framework?
no. Just the execution, like to select specific set of test cases that we want to run among the complete suite.
Exactly. How efficiently we can handle the inventory of huge test cases. How efficiently we can have a selected number of tests to be executed. To address that problem, we have a technology, we have a tool called as TestNG. TestNG internally generates a report for you. If you guys would have observed so far, Selenium by default doesn't generate any report for you, right? We always used to see in console. Do you guys remember our old days when we used to run the test cases? Always used output always in console, but there was no specific report, like kind of a structured way of when I run 500 test cases, I don't have any structured way to say that out of 500, 200 pass, 400 failed, pass percentage, something that sort of. TestNG will give you by default, very simple, but it will give you by default some small report, which will tell you how many test case I selected using this XML, how many has been executed, how many failed, and so on. Are you guys with me? You're getting on? Okay. I'll just take 5 minutes break and I'm gonna come back. Very important topic called as Maven after this. Okay. Again, it relates with a framework building. So take a 5-minute break, come back, refresh. This is very important and very interesting topic, Maven. Okay. See you guys. Okay. So we are learning about automation framework and what are the different technologies we need to develop a framework, why we need it. And like I said, each and every technology is targeted towards one problem statements in the overall automation building, right? It may not help you to do everything. So one technology will help you one specific aspect of your automation. So similarly, when you integrate so much of different technologies together to address those different problem statements, then you say you are building a automation framework, right? So if you remember, in initial days we learned about Git. So what is Git? It's a version control system, right? When you have 20 different people working in a project and you want to make sure that all our code resides at one place, so that we don't need to manually copy and paste each and everyone's code, right? We need some place where you can automatically say, hey, I uploaded my code, and other person will automatically take a latest copy and start building on top of it, right? Rather than through communicator or through email sharing a code with each other. So we need some kind of mechanism to address that problem, and that problem will be addressed by technology called Git, right? So version control, for every code check-in, it will create an automatic versions. It will try to find out the merge issues, conflicts, and then there are so many things. There are some more version controls like SVN, Bitbucket, right? These are all different version control system, VCS system. Either it can be Bitbucket, it can be Git, it can be SVN. SVN is pretty old, no one uses it now. The most latest is the Git and Bitbuckets, So this technology solves one aspect of one problem of your automation. What is that? How do multiple people can work together, right? Parallelly, how they can work together, how they can upload their code, get the latest copy, how they can merge each other's code so that they can work on a same script. All this problem statement is solved by Git. Today we also learned about TestNG, right? TestNG, on a high level, we understood what specific aspect of our automation it helps us to solve. That technology helps us to solve the granular way of building test cases, executing the test cases, quickly selecting what test cases I want to execute, right? More logical approach of building and executing our test cases. That problem is solved by another technology called TestNG. Jenkins, we're gonna learn about, like you said, CI. We're gonna learn there. Page object model, at least on a high level, I gave you guys idea about what specific problem statement page object model is gonna help us, right? It is not a separate technology. It is a design pattern. The way we create our test cases, the way we're gonna handle our object repository. Okay, it's not a separate technology, but it is a methodology, I would say. Okay, we'll learn about it. For reporting framework, we have extend reports and log4j. At the last of towards that, we will learn again a separate technology which will help us to find out the different reports in our automation. Okay, and when we integrate all of this technology together, we say, okay, I'm building what? I'm building automation framework. You getting my point? So that each and every technology which we are using is helping us to address one specific problem. And it's not limited just to this. Sometimes you may have some specific problems in your automation, saying like you want to validate some very difficult PDF files, right? You want to validate. So you will start looking into the technology which helps us to deal with such PDF files, or I don't know, whatever it is, different kind of problems. So you will identify, okay, there is a plugin, there is a jar file, there is a technology which helps me to do this. You will integrate that in your automation. You will say, okay, this is a part of my automation framework now. Execution strategy, even though TestNG helps you to select and pick the test cases, it doesn't help you where to execute. I mean to say, what server it has to execute. Either it has to run on a cloud server, it has to run locally, it has to run. That again, that is a separate technology which helps you to identify that. Okay. If you want to run your test case on the cloud, there are so many players in the market now. Browser Stack is the one, Sauce Labs is the one. So you will you will try to use their capabilities to run your test on the cloud. You know what I'm saying? When you want to run your test with different browser versions, different OS platform, you want to run with mobile, you want to run with Windows, you want to run on Mac, you want to run on different versions of Mac, different versions of Windows, different versions of Linux. That's another problem statement. That problem statement can be solved by another technology. Like I said, Sauce Labs is there, browser stacks are there, which helps you to on the fly select the browser, select the OS platform, and then run your test on it. You don't need to do any configuration. You know, it runs your test on the cloud and gives you the report. So you have to think very broad when you think about automation framework building, that what all problem statement you are trying to address. Okay. So, hey guys, before I proceed, I just want to ask you guys humble feedback. Are my sessions really helping you guys to learn about automation? It's been almost a month now we are learning. I think more than a month. I hope my sessions are able to add in your learning, right? You guys, you guys are able to get a good understanding about automation, and I hope the day you started and the day you are now, you can really see a difference in your thought process or the way you know. And if you guys really feel that my sessions are helping, please write a review for me. I'm gonna send a link to you. Just take five minutes of your own. Most of the students learn from me and then they drop and they forget. Okay, so if because I'm passionately teaching, and this is how I want to build my career going forward. So your help will help me to build my base. You know. So I'll send you guys a link. Whatever is your feedback, whether it's positive or negative, or you have any inputs for me, feel free to write it. Okay. I am open for improvement. Now, coming back to Maven. Now, what is Maven? Let's understand in what the Maven is gonna help. So now at least you understood that whenever we are talking about different technologies, each of those technologies are helping us to address a specific problem in automation, right? Now let me talk about a problem statement, and I want to listen something from you guys. So if you remember, when we started doing a setup for Selenium, we downloaded Eclipse, we downloaded Selenium jars, right? We imported those Selenium jars in our project. If you remember, we right click this project, go to properties, and then in libraries, we imported that Selenium jars, isn't it? And then similarly, we did for TestNG, because we want to consume what the TestNG gives us, right? So we downloaded TestNG jars also, and then we imported the TestNG jars also. Now let me ask you guys, we imported a specific version of a Selenium. If you remember, there are a lot of versions, right? Every year or every 6 months or maybe every 2 years, you will get new versions of WebDriver. Now, do you think it is convenient, or it is, in terms of maintenance, it is good to manually add these jars in our project? Because tomorrow, if the version changes, tomorrow they come up with a new version. Now, what would be your strategy to update to a new version of a WebDriver? Can anyone tell me?
It should be backward compatible, right, Saurabh?
Yes, that's true. It should be. But if you want to consume a new methods given by Selenium,
So add the new jars and we should be able to run it.
yes, that is the right approach. So a simple approach is, if tomorrow we get a new Selenium version, what we will probably do is we'll right click, go to properties, remove that old jars and import the new jars, right? Okay, sounds good. Now let's assume this. So you have 10 different team members in your team, right? And not necessarily all of them using a same Selenium version. They may use some may use 1.8, some may use 2.8, or just giving a rough example. And then when your code goes from one system to another system, it fails. If you guys remember, you're uploading this jar from your local disk. Okay. If you go to your properties, the reference of those jar is from your local hard drive, right? So what I mean to say is, here, if you go to Java build path, this is the Selenium jar, whatever we have uploaded, right? All these things. Now, if you see the location of this user Saurabh downloads, this is the jar which is residing on my machine, right? Similarly, whoever is using a Selenium, like Joseph, you are using it, it's on your machine. Divya uses, it's on Divya's machine. When I check in this code, some person check out this code and he tries to work, of course, he'll have to update the location, right? He'll have to update the location, because right now the current location refers to my repository. So let's assume, okay, even if I made this repository, this location as absolute, which means, it will go to a specific external file folder and it will pick it up. Now the problem here is, when the new version of Selenium comes, all of those people who are using 10 different versions or whatever, everyone has to go to their project, right click, and then upload the new version, right? Sometimes these different versions can create a complexity to work together, isn't it? I may use 1.6, you may use 1.8. Like Ravali said, it has to be backward compatible. Yes, most of the time it is, but you also need to understand that automation is a continuous journey. So what happens if they already identify some problems in an existing version? They'll try to deprecate that and provide a much more better solution in a new version, right? When I say deprecate, means no more supported, or that method will no more be useful. So if you want to keep up with the pace of new versions, don't you think that this will create a lot of maintenance effort for you? It will, right? And we are not just talking about Selenium. As I said, each of those individual technology will have their own jars. Like TestNG has its own jars, right? Tomorrow we're gonna use reporting framework jars. We haven't added it, but after some classes we will add the reporting framework jars. Apache POI libraries, if you wanna add those, that will be a separate jar. So ultimately we will build so many jars because we want to consume each of the capabilities provided by those individual tools, and each of them has a different versions, right? Now TestNG 7.1 works with, let's say, Selenium 2.8, but TestNG 7.3 doesn't work with the old version of Selenium. Let's assume that. So again, there is a version compatibility issues. You're getting my point? And also I want you guys to focus on what problem statement we are focusing now. Okay, I'm not focusing on testing strategy or not focusing on object management. Here we are discussing about dependencies, right? Here we are talking about, okay, my execution, my entire automation framework is dependent on Selenium jars. My entire automation is dependent on TestNG jars. My automation is dependent on reporting jars. And they may work with each other, they may not work with each other, like compatibility issues, right? TestNG right now is working along with the existing version of Selenium WebDriver. Tomorrow Selenium WebDriver comes with a new version, but we haven't upgraded it. You know, we say, okay, let it run on old, I don't mind. But we want to upgrade the new version of TestNG because we heard that, hey, you know, the new version of TestNG provides these annotations and it's very useful and it's very nice. You'll say, oh, you know what? Okay, let me upgrade my TestNG. You will go ahead, upgrade your TestNG, you remove this jar, add a new jar. But now you realize, oh, you know what? The new TestNG version works only with the latest version of WebDriver. And I'm still on the old version of WebDriver. Now you need to also upgrade the old version to a new version of WebDriver. So that entire upgrade and compatibility and dependency takes a lot of your time. You're getting the problem now?
Yeah.
And also it is a time consuming process to download those jars, import it. It is not a peaceful solution, I would say, right? And that is why Maven comes into picture. Now Maven says, hey, I'm a magical tool and I'll help you to avoid all this download and importing on your own. I'll take care of everything automatically for you. You know, so what Maven says, Maven says you no need to worry about downloading the jars or storing it somewhere else. Maven says, okay, you have your test scripts. What you need? So let's assume I need TestNG jars. I need Selenium jars. I need reporting jars, right? So right now, what we are doing is, this is my entire project. When I say project, Eclipse project, right? In Eclipse project, we manually download and import this jar, manually download, import this jar, manually download, import this jar. So Maven says, you know what? And tomorrow you will run into the issues of compatibility, upgrade, and all those things. So that's why you do one thing. I'll be a middle layer for you. Okay. What you do is, you don't do this manually. You just download and install me. Okay. And then whatever you need, can I say all this as dependencies? Because our project is dependent on those jars, right? Because we are consuming a methods which is inside those jars, nothing but compressed Java files. So we are consuming a methods given by these jars, which means I can say my entire automation is dependent on those jars, right? So in a technical word, I can say these are all my dependencies, right? Now what Maven says, this is a Maven in between, whatever this guy, slim and good height. Now this Maven says, you no need to do all these things manually. You do one thing, you tell me what you need in a one line statement, and then I will automatically in a runtime fetch all those things for you. What does it mean?
We need to have all these jars, at least downloaded in our
No,
machine, or we can
no,
have to download also.
you no need to download it. You no need to download it. You no need to import it. You no need to do anything. It is like there are two ways. In an email, you attach actual Excel file if you want to send it to someone, or you upload it to a Google Drive and send a link to that person. You getting my point? So when you upload it on a Google Drive and you send a link to that person, he'll either download it from that link or he'll directly go and read it, and that's it. It saves your time, because tomorrow if you want to update that Excel sheet, you no need to send the latest version again in an email. You will simply update in a Google Drive and the latest version is already with the person. You're getting my point? because you shared a link with him. You didn't share the actual file with him, right? Just on that similar line, you think of this problem statement now. What Maven says, Maven is a technology. Now, when you understand dependency, I'll say it's a dependency manager. Okay. So Maven says, okay, you know what? If you need Selenium jar, you tell me what you need. What version of Selenium you need? You just tell me. You'll say, okay, fine. What version of TestNG you need? You tell me. What version of reporting framework you need? You tell me. What version of Apache? And believe me, there is more than 5,000 different things you can use in automation. Do you think you will able to download all this 500 things and then keep on importing in your project? The size will keep on increasing, right? That is why Maven says, okay, you know what? I have something called as Maven repository. Okay. So it is similar to Google repository, let's say, somewhere else here. Okay. So Maven says, you know what? I maintain a bank of things where I keep all these things together. So now let me do like this. When it was individually downloading it, now here, now this entire thing, whatever initially we were downloading it and putting it in our own, why I need to do this multiple times, send it to back. Okay. So initially when we were downloading these individual jars, we are downloading it to our own hard drive and importing it and then doing a lot of things. Now Maven says, you know, I have already done that in my own repository or a folder where it says, okay, I have a Maven repository where I downloaded all the versions of Selenium, all the versions of TestNG, all the versions of reporting framework. You just tell me what you need. So when you tell the Maven what you need, Maven will fetch that particular thing from the Maven repository. You get my point? Maven is one technology. Maven repository is a place where you store all those different jar files. Git is a technology. GitHub is a repository. You guys need to understand the difference, right? Git is a technology, version control technology, which automatically helps you to manage the versions, merge your code, do the branching, and do the lot of things. That's why you download and install Git on your machine so that it helps you to do the version control. But the GitHub is a repository. It is a bank where you actually upload your code to store, right? On a similar line, Maven is a technology which you download and install on your project. But Maven repository is a place where you have all these dependencies already uploaded, right? So let me show you. So if you go and type Maven repository, now if you come to this mavenrepository.com, now here if you see, the moment I come to Maven repository, you will be surprised to see how many details it has. Some of them you will not even understand what are those. You know, there are so many things. You will have artifacts for each of the different areas. For HTML parser, there is a separate technology. For core utilities, separate technology. Code analyzer, separate technology. Build tools, separate technology. Like I said, mocking, object relations, PDF files, and so on. It's a never ending. For each of the problem statements, you will have a one specific tool. And if you want to consume that tool, you no need to download and import it to your project manually. What you will do, you will search that in a Maven repository, and it is something called as dependency. We'll learn about the POM file. So you create that POM file and you add that link that, hey Maven, I want Selenium, I want TestNG, I want reporting framework. Now here in our case, what we need, very first thing what we need, Selenium, right? Just search about Selenium. Selenium Java. In Selenium also you will see a lot of things. So let's go to Selenium Java. Now, what I'm gonna do for you guys is, whatever Selenium we initially added, okay. So if I go to this, and you remember this all jar, how this jar came? When I actually went ahead in my project and added the Selenium jars, right? If you remember, we imported all the Selenium jars, right? We downloaded it and we Selenium. See this Selenium.java, Selenium.java, Selenium, and then some more. So from here to here, 1, 2. What is Selenium version? It is 3.14, right? So now let's say if I have all these jar files which I downloaded and uploaded, if I want to remove them, I'm simply gonna remove them. And if I remove them, do you think my code will work? Of course it will not, right? Because it doesn't have Selenium jars now. Now here what we're gonna do is, rather than downloading and importing it here in a Maven, we're gonna say, hey Maven, I want this particular Selenium jar files, where we're gonna say that in something called as POM file. We'll create that. And there we will define will define that I want this version of Selenium. So here if you see, they have a lot of different versions, right? You have version 4 which is in alpha now, but 3.14, I think this is what I was using, right? 3.14, probably I can expand in reference library and I can see which version. Yeah, 3.14. So if I want to consume 3.14, then this is the 3.14. I'll click on the 3.14 version. The moment I click on 3.14, see, for every different build tools, I have a different thing. If you remember, I was telling about what is the build tool, right? Let's not go in that detail, but we are using Maven right now. There's something called as Gradle, called SBT, used for Scala tests for Gradle projects, Ivy, Grape, and so many. Don't worry about all them. Focus on build. Now, what Maven says, if you want to use this Selenium version, then you add this dependency tag in your XML. That's it. It's that easy. So I'll show you how in a runtime it will import your jars. Now Selenium, by just adding this tag in your Maven, it will do everything for you. Means it will download, it will in whatever dependency you need, it will do everything on its own. So let's do one thing. Now we'll create a Maven project. So right click new. When you select, generally you search a Java project, you say normal project. Now here, if you see in this drop down, you have something called as Maven, right? In an Eclipse, expand the Maven and say Maven project. You'll say, okay, Maven project, click next. Now, of course, I know location and all, I don't want to change, so I'll keep it by default. Now here, when you create a Maven project, there are different templates, okay? There are different templates provided by Maven. Don't get confused about what these templates are. Templates are basically, it says, okay, if you're automating a Java application, if you're doing a web automation or mobile automation or API automation, not automation, basically the development, then you can use different. For most of the automation projects, you are good to select with a default template of quick start, okay? Because Maven is gonna give you some kind of project structure. If you remember, when we created a project, there was no structure for it, right? Okay, let me cancel it. When we created a normal Java project, we have a very basic structure of SRC. That's it. There is, and then we created our own packages inside it, right? And then inside a package, we created our own class files. So there is no predefined structure here inside a project, which we have received either from Eclipse or from someone else, right? There is no proper structure. So Maven says, okay, I'm going to create a structure for you inside a project based on your need. Need means what type of work you are trying to do. So like I said, most of the time we select a quick starter template. So just select a quick start template, click next. Now group ID and artifact ID, it is kind of more keeping your project in a modularized way. So consider group ID as your entire project, and in a artifact ID as your own specific module, you know. So here I'll say test Maven, and artifact ID I'll say first Maven. You can type anything, and then it will automatically create a package name for you, group ID dot artifact ID. Okay, so you can give anything. Version, don't worry about it, let it be, and then say finish. Now what it will do, see, it is it will create a blank project for you. If you see first Maven, this is the blank project. Let me put it at can I move it down? Okay, now if I expand this, or you will see small m here, which indicates it's a Maven project. Now if you see this SRC folder, this folder, this, from how it came, because we selected a specific Maven template, right? Now if I expand this, it will again have automatically created a package for you. If you expand this, it automatically created one sample test for you, right? Now if I try to open this app.java, you see it is he's basically given you one small structure like a main method and a normal called as class app, right? If I right click and if I run as let's say Java application, then it will print it hello world, right? Okay, so it has basically created a structure for you. Similarly, if you go to SRC, if you go to Maven, then here also you see. Now I'm going to talk about the difference between these two later on, but now let's assume that I want to use this project for a Selenium. Now how do I, what is the first thing I should do? Can anyone tell me? I want to start writing my Selenium tests inside this project.
Import Selenium jars.
We import Selenium jars.
I meant call the Selenium jars in the XML file which you told.
Exactly. Now, if you guys carefully observe, when I expand this project, you at the last you get something called as pom.xml, right? POM, pom.xml. If I double click and open this, now you will see some defined structure. Don't worry about this. Click on pom.xml here. Now here, if you see this XML, it has a lot of tags, right? This is gonna be your homework to understand more about the XML, but in a simple way. Group ID is what we have given, artifact ID, version, packaging. Don't worry about this. Thing you want to focus is dependencies. If you go back to our diagram, you understood what was our dependency. Our dependency is I want Selenium, I want TestNG, I want reporting jars, right? Dependencies is plural. Inside that I'll have individual dependency. This is one dependency which it is by default adding. We don't need JUnit, so I'll delete JUnit. Okay. Now, if you remember when we manually add, okay, you started throwing an error because this folder has some test which is on the JUnit. So let it be, let's say, as of now, just for our sake. Now, now if you expand Maven dependencies, right now we have what? JUnit jar. Did we download and import this JUnit jar? No, because someone has already added a JUnit dependency. We have got that jar, right? Now, if I delete this dependency and if I save it, probably here you will start building a workspace. Now, if you see that Maven dependency folder itself has disappeared because there is no dependency tag here. You're getting my point?
Yeah.
Now, the moment I give that dependency tag again, and if I save it, see here building workspace, you got the Maven dependency, automatically imported those jars, added it here.
Yeah.
Right? Now, similarly, in going back to our old project of Selenium, when we manually go and import, if you remember, in under reference library, we start seeing those jars, right? When we manually download and import. Now, because we are using a Maven project, we don't need to do that because that's what the Maven technology is all about, right? I want Selenium jars. What I'll do, like I said, go to Maven repository, search for Selenium, which version we want, 5.3.14, which is go to Maven tag. This is the dependency tag. Just copy this dependency tag, right click. Now you will see the magic. Go back to, now inside dependencies, you will add one more dependency. See, the moment I paste this tag and when I click save, I want you guys to observe this. Two things. One is look at here, not these images, okay? look at this part, and then I want you to observe under Maven dependency what happens. Okay, I'm gonna click on save button. See, I clicked on save button. You see what is happening here? Building workspace, and let me go and let it. Okay, it looks like it is done. Building workspace. Okay, now let me expand this. Okay, what magic do you see? All Selenium jars are automatically imported by Maven for you, right? I am working on which version? 3.14. Now, if I want to start writing my test, let's say I'm going to write it here. Let's assume I'm going to explain you the difference between these two folders. It has already created a project for me. Very good. I'm going to create a new class file under this project. So I'll say, okay, new class. And let's say first Maven Selenium test. First Maven Selenium test, and then public static void. So we will use main method because we haven't imported testng so far. Okay, you see finish. Okay, normal structure. Now what is one thing I should do here? I'll simply copy paste our previous code of, you know. So what is the first thing we do when we write of Selenium?
parsing, web driver.
Doing web driver.
Okay. Now here, if I hover my mouse, do you see import? From where it is coming? From, because Maven has already imported Selenium jars for you, you get this option, right? If you don't have that, so let's say I'm removing this dependency, saving it. Now you see it will say building workspace. And now if I expand that Maven dependencies, see all the Selenium disappeared, right? Now if I go here and try to hover my mouse, it will not give me import. Why? Of course, because I haven't added those jars in my project. So how it will say import, right? Are you getting this point?
Yes.
So I'll add that Selenium dependency. Okay, let me save it. See, it has added those jars so quickly. Now come to Maven and then hover your mouse, import. Okay, then come here and add your, say, import. Okay, now I'm ready to write my test. You say driver dot, see, find element. Okay, silently ignore. And I have all the methods available now for me, by dot id, and then give anything, and then I want a dot click, let's say, and I'm good to write my tests, right? So we are avoiding a costly process of downloading Selenium jars, importing Selenium jars. Tomorrow, if I want to upgrade from this version to next version, let's assume, or I want to downgrade, I want to test on the old version of Selenium. What I'll do, I'll go to Maven repository, I'll go to selenium.java. What repository I want to test? So let's say I want to test on 2.53 version. What I'll do, I'll go to 2.531 version. Okay, I'll see this dependency. Is there anything different? Only version number is different. So I'll copy this version. Whatever I already have, I'll go to my pom.xml. Here in the version, rather than 3.140, I want you to observe these jar versions. Okay, simply give an old version, click save, and you will see the magic building workspace. Let it build. It is building 91%. Let me, it will take time. What it will do, now it will downgrade your Selenium to 2.53 version. Now expand your Maven dependency. Now you see 2.2.2. Everything.
Yeah.
So you're ready to test your code on the old version of Selenium also. The code will not change, right? Because most of the methods are available in the old Selenium version and new Selenium version also. So by just changing one parameter in pom.xml, you guys are able to switch on Selenium versions, which is very flexible, very easy. So this technology has solved one problem statement for us. And also it has avoided the manual download and import of jars, right? So now if I give this code to you, it will work on your machine also, because in your machine, there is no need of hard-coded jar files, right? Maven will do that work for you on the fly. Now, if I want to use testng, how can I do? Can anyone tell me?
Maven repository, say testng, what's testng, and
Dependency tag. Yeah, you can say dependency tag. So go to testng, go to, let's say, 7.1. So I'll click on 7.1. Now see dependency tag for testng. Copy this dependency tag. Come to your project. Under dependencies, so like I said, dependency is a plural. This is one dependency. This is Selenium dependency. I want testng. I'll come here, add the new dependency tag. That's it. Save it. See, building workspace. Let it build. And what it will do, it will give you all testng. Now expand the Maven dependencies. Now somewhere else you will also see testng. See this 7.1. And now you are good to write your testng tests, right? So go to your package, right click, say new class. You don't need main method when you write testng, right? So you say testng test, say finish. Class name has to start with capital letter, so sorry for that. Now you are gonna write a testng test, so you will say okay, public void, like login. It doesn't accept anything, let's say, and just print something. System.out.println and then login test. Just writing a normal code, and then here if I want to identify this, I'll say test, because we want to use testng annotations, right? And now hover your mouse, you have import, see, import it. Here we go, we have written our first testng test also. So what we used testng, we used Maven, we used Selenium, right? And when we want to run this testng test, either you can see, for running a testng test, we also generate testng XML. If you remember in our previous session, we discussed about testng XML, right? Tomorrow's class, I'm gonna correlate the POM XML and testng XML. Okay. So how does it work is, you define the selection of test cases where in testng XML, and when you run your project, you run it as a Maven build tool. So little bit confusing, but it will make sense. So you run a Maven test, you say, hey, can you please run the Maven build for me? Maven will start looking into your testng. You'll say, okay, what test I want to run? It will decide what test to run based on this testng XML, right? And it will start running those tests for you. So here, if I come here, and if I not here, go to project level, right click, go to testng and say convert to testng, because we don't have that XML right now here, right? So when I say convert to testng, it will give you some sample format of testng XML and say finish. And then here you see below that POM XML, you have testng XML now. Now here you can define what test you want to run. So let's say I just simply want to run this test. So now I have testng XML, I have POM XML. See, in my POM XML, I talk about dependencies. In my testng, I talk about what test I want to run, right? And now if I right click on this, and if I go to run as, I'll run as testng suite, or I can run this entire project as a Maven build. We'll talk about that, okay? So to run a Maven project, we need a Maven Surefire plugin. To run testng, we need testng plugin. So I hope you guys are clear about why we need jars and why we need plugin. Plugin is to run the test cases, okay? So I'll stop here for today, and in tomorrow's session we're gonna relate Maven and testng with together, right? And I'll close the loop of a version control Git also, so that you understand a bigger picture now, why Git, Maven, testng, and then we'll start learning about Log4j. Okay, now again, Log4j is another technology which solves another problem, let's say extend report. Now when I say I want to solve a reporting problem, I need that technology, that jars. Do you think again I'll go download and import that? No, right? I'll come here and I'll say Log4j, right? Apache Log4j. I'll go, okay, Apache Log4j. Which version? Okay, let's say this version. Go here, dependency. That's it. It's that simple now. Just copy this dependency, Log4j, and I'm ready to use new technology now. Go to where? POM.xml, right? So how Maven is solving so many problems for you. See, under this dependency, I have Selenium dependency. See, now this is also very beautiful. If you want to test testng version 7.1 with 2.53, this is how you will do. If you want to test latest version of Selenium with testng, simply you will change a version here, and then you are good to test. If you want Log4j, copy this, paste it, Okay, did I miss? I think the dependency. Okay, the tags are missing. It has to be like this, and then yeah. So I added the log4j. Save it. Now, if I go to, did I do any mistake? Dependency, ending tag dependency. It has to be proper aligned like this. Another dependency. Okay. Another okay. Okay. It has to be dependencies. Okay. This is how it is. This is my third dependency. And then save it. Okay, building workspace, all the errors solved. If I expand Maven dependencies somewhere else, I'll also see log4j jars. See this last one, right? And I'm ready to use log4j. Okay, so I hope you guys understood the need of Maven. Maven is also a build tool. Okay, take this as a homework. Explore about build tool. I'm going to talk about build tool tomorrow. No need to go in depth. Just understand what the build tool is, and at least you understood Maven as a dependency manager now, right? And we are start closing the we are start integrating these different technologies now to address one specific problem in automation, and that's what we call it as automation framework building. Okay, see you guys tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Bye.